This is Linux In-Laws, a podcast on free Libre open source software, broadcasting from the United Kingdom and Germany.
Welcome to Linux In-Laws, Season 2, Episode 52. Martin, how are things on this somewhat strange Wednesday, I suppose?
Strange? How come?
I heard some rumors about certain revolutions or revolutionaries in the
Indeed.
UK.
Indeed, yes, we have those. Yeah.
Yes, so care to enlighten us?
Well, it's a time when, some time ago, or many years ago, some guy decided to set off a bunch of fireworks underneath Parliament and stuff. So, and
Yes.
well,
We
not
were-
fireworks, but gunpowder. Let's put it that way.
we are recording this in the autumn of 1872, if
No,
memory is not correct.
1605.
I see, very good. So this may be another time-traveling episode, but this is not about time travel, but rather about a free Libre open source software. With that, Martin and myself, I reckon, would like to introduce our guest for tonight, a certain professor, I think. Professor, doctor? Is it Dr. Klaus Knopper?
No.
It's just
doctor,
professor.
Professor.
Okay.
And
but
engineer. I'm very happy about this.
Klaus, but Klaus, before I give it even more wrong, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. Klaus Knopper, professor for software engineering and agile software development at the University of Kaiserslautern, and also a self-employed software developer based almost entirely on open source projects, which is really the heart of my work. So that's where all the projects that we're probably going to talk about tonight arose. And so my hobby is actually also my profession.
Excellent. Klaus, let's go back a few decades. You were born in 1972 or something like that? And what happened afterwards?
Oh, wow, 72. No, I'm actually older, 1968.
You sound younger, though. So what happened after 1968? We do have all the time, so don't give us the abbreviated version, but rather
Good year,
go,
68.
exactly.
Yeah.
So go full detail if you want.
Actually, in the first part of my life, I had nothing to do with computers. Actually, I hated them because I thought they're complicated and not easy to understand, and I can actually not do anything useful with it. Of course, this was before I discovered open source. Yeah, this was before we started exploring the internet as students, and I came in contact with the first versions of Linux, which I was really an early adopter at that time. I think we had version 1.2 or something of the first Linux on floppy disks edition, and I was thrilled by that because now I had something that just works right off the box on my computer, and I can actually understand and discover what it does, and not just use something that I have to read a lot of manuals. And this was my first contact with open source operating systems.
So you hated computers
Yes.
initially, okay? Because
actually, I still do, because I think that computers are, which we use nowadays, are really ill-designed somehow.
Okay.
They could have had a much more cleaner design. Everything is so special for each hardware developer. We have to write drivers for this and for that because the bus systems are different, the timing is different, the construction of the architecture of CPUs is different. So, this is the part of the main problems that I have with a hardware detecting operating system. There are so many things to be aware of and so many errors in the hardware to work around, which makes my life hard. And actually, it's exciting to find workarounds for things that are not supposed to work in some hardware. So yes, I don't like computers themselves, but I'm fond of using software and of developing software to use computers for something, really useful for people.
I'm almost tempted to say, welcome to Martin's world. Because he has computers too, but
for useful things, yes. Good idea.
but he apparently loves software. I don't know, Martin. Any thoughts on this?
Well, Well, I was going to say, sounds like you're a fan of communism, where everything is the same.
Oh goodness!
all this competition and people making different hardware. That's not ideal for those who want to keep everything simple, I suppose.
Yeah, well, let's say it positive. I'm a fan of open hardware, where you have specifications that you can follow, where you have something documented, like graphic cards, where you actually know how to write free drivers that use all of the features that can be used without needing proprietary firmware, for that matter.
Well, everything is NVIDIA
plus
nowadays.
Open source software would be the ideal.
I was just going to say everything is NVIDIA in terms of graphic cards these days now, so you're probably kind of sort of a standardization there.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, maybe this is going to change. Who knows?
Actually, we should probably cover your early computer life then, since you hated them. Where did you start with?
Yes, spill the hate.
Actually, in a gymnasium, first in school, when all my classmates started using the first, Apple II or something, or Commodore computers, I found this all very, very boring. And since at that time we didn't have informatics classes at school, I skipped this entire thing with computers until I started studying electrotechnics. Well, electrical engineering was something I wanted to do: build electric cars, build solar plants, solve the energy crisis. It was way too early right then, and out of pure frustration, I started working with software and computers. Actually, we had informatics by then, a class which I first failed because I thought it was utterly uninteresting, which may be caused by we had to learn Pascal. You know Pascal? It's cruel. It's maybe good for learning, but
I grew
Pascal,
up with
excellent.
it.
Yes, good.
I grew up with it. I actually wrote my bachelor's thesis in mostly in Turbo Pascal and a little bit of assembler back in the 90s, 2000s. 2010s, I think. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to go back to that dating later on. So what happened afterwards?
We are still in the hate phase.
Yes.
At that time, students were not allowed to use the internet at the university. Somehow I found out that I'm not the only one using the university computer for the Pascal exercises and everything. And curious as I am, I wondered, how can I look at the exercises and solutions of my co-students? And so I started working myself into operating systems, file systems, networking. Actually, I didn't hack or crack anything, but this way I discovered that the university was connected to a bigger network, which was the upcoming internet. No www at that time, though. But we were able actually to get in contact with students from all over the world, like early communication networks like IRC, you know IRC still, which was able to transfer files and not only send messages, but also hold meetings. No video at that time.
Back in the day, yes.
Yeah. This I found very, very interesting. So making contacts with others all over the world just from my small computer at the university. And from there on, I was working myself into understanding how all this works with TCP/IP, network drivers, security measures. And this is where I really started being interested in software technology and internet. So during my studies of electrical engineering, which was frustrating because nobody liked electric cars at that time, I started working with IT stuff and even got some jobs at the university to maintain computers, to install software for others, which was at that time the time I discovered open source, because many popular processing systems like LaTeX, security and compression tools were not installed by default on the computers, and students wanted to use these because they are very, very good for creating books and thesis works. So I compiled them from scratch and installed them in my private home directory, giving other students access to it. And naturally, the computer department liked the idea of somebody else maintaining the software which was used by users and maybe also doing support. So I got a small job in that matter and was then installing open source software on the university computers for everybody. So this was my start with Unix as well. And Linux came a little afterwards. We founded a student group called the Unix AG, the Student Unix Working Group. We got some funding from the state in order to buy a more expensive Unix computer where students were able to learn about programming and the internet. First time that we had a internet for students at the university. And so our group grew up to, I think we had up to 40 students involved at the maximum time. And from that and during the rise of Linux in the 90s, we also founded the Linux Tag Association, which was then at some time holding the largest Linux and open source conference in Germany, maybe even Europe. It was at times even bigger than the Linux Expo. And this was just run by us 10 students. And we invited commercial Linux companies. At one time, we even had Microsoft holding a lecture about how they develop open source software, or at least a Linux derivative, which they never actually announced or made commercials for. That was fun.
Sorry to interrupt. When was this alleged Microsoft?
Yes, I think that the Microsoft lecture talk about their open source attempts and the so-called Windows subsystem for Unix, or was it Unix subsystem for Windows? I keep forgetting. You could compile GIMP and other popular Linux tools right on that subsystem. It had been running an NT kernel, but it had an POSIX subsystem, an entire Unix built around it.
That was before WSL, right? As a Windows subsystem for Linux.
Exactly.
Because that came later.
Exactly. And the developers always told us they are not allowed to talk too much about it because they had an in-house concurrent to the Windows operating system there, which was working pretty well. And I found this exciting. And maybe they learned from their early attempts, and so they now try to integrate a Linux subsystem that you could work with even if you otherwise have trouble working with Windows.
I mean, in an attempt to put the two remaining listeners to sleep, no, jokes aside, but in the olden days, Windows NT as a new technology was quite an open system because you had a microkernel which was proprietary, but you could put different personalities on top of it. Open, not in the sense of freely open source software, but rather open in terms of you could put different operating systems personalities on top of that microkernel. So I reckon that was one of the kind of internal projects of Microsoft attempting to put something that looked like Unix on top of NT, as in the original microkernel developed by Dave Cutler and friends, because you're talking early 90s now.
Yes. And so this was the POSIX API of Windows, basically, where you could compile Unix programs on top of. How it comes we are not talking about Microsoft. Well, I was in the flow of explaining the Linux Tag Expo and conference.
Indeed.
Yes. And of course, we also had the usual Unix and Linux crowd there as well. Also big companies who are already promoting Linux. IBM at the time was very famous for their Linux commercials, which were sometimes a little strange, but on the other hand, revealing that Linux is actually a business case where you can make money with and where you can buy commercial support. And I think this was good for the Linux ecosystem to hear about the commercial attempts to bring forward Linux and open source. very exciting time. Later on, I think it was in 2005, many other Linux expos and conferences came up. So now this is split between many different and topic-focused events. And so the Linux Tag diminished from year to year until it vanished completely, which is kind of sad, but it was for me a very exciting time where I learned a lot of how to make a life and a business with open source software as well. So to say it's not just being free in terms of you can use it for free, but you can also make a living from it, and you can offer commercial services, support, and of course you can write commercial open source software.
Of course. That was kind of late 90s, early 2000s, right? When the Linux Day was founded in Berlin, give or take a few years.
Actually 1997, I know, because it was my first attempt with live Linux systems. The first one actually published was 2001. That was Knoppix version 1 on the Atlanta Linux Showcase, which was then used as the official Linux Tag CD to integrate our conference material, and having a Linux underneath which you could just start and play the videos and read the documents right under Linux on your PC.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. You just mentioned the word Knoppix. If memory serves correct, Knoppix is one of the, if not the first live Linux CD in terms of, it's a Debian spin. It goes back about 75 years, give or take a few. I'm joking. It goes back to what, 24 years, 25 years, something like that?
Yes.
But it's one of the first live CDs. And I can recall messages in internet forums during that period which said that it would be the ideal rescue CD in terms of you fucked up your system, you simply burn Knoppix on a CD, insert the CD, boot from it, and then rescue your system using Knoppix.
Exactly, you could do that, but the main purpose was something different. Knoppix, that's true, was one of the first live systems, but actually not the first. I was inspired by the very small live system from the Linux Care company. I think this was on a CeBIT conference in 1996 or 7. And they had a small CD of 20 megabyte size, and they fit a small floppy disk plus utility image on it, which contained only rescue tools like fdisk, which also exists on Linux, and a few tools where you could mount DOS and NTFS, I think. Was NTFS? No, not NTFS yet. I think it was FAT32, and repair your system from there. And my way of thinking was, if such a lot of software fits on a business card size CD, on a full size CD, which was at that time 650 megabytes, I could fit in all the tools that I use and love, even LaTeX, an open source office system, the entire tool set, games, you name it, and have a system that I can just carry with myself in my pocket, use any computer that is standing around anywhere in an internet cafe, and work with my system without having to install anything. That was the idea behind Knoppix. So not exactly as a just rescue system, but as a working system where you could just work with Linux with no questions asked about configuration or anything. It doesn't need to be installable because we want to leave the computers untouched. Yeah, you exit the CD and the system is like it was before. And people use this for actually discovering Linux. So they wanted to try out, does my graphics card work with Linux? What tools are there? Could I switch already, or can I use this for everyday work? So they used it actually for something that I hadn't planned to. For me, Knoppix was always an experiment for advanced Linux users. But since it does so many things on its own, like detecting your hardware and just booting from zero to the ready desktop without asking a single question, is of course a very easy start to begin with Linux and finding out if your computer is Linux compatible. So this was probably the main reason why so many people started downloading it after I published it. By the way, the first version was not yet based on Debian. It was actually Red Hat.
Okay.
When I one day had to switch the major version because they upgraded their system, this was very hard. So in 2001, I switched to Debian actually, and I could just upgrade the system, even do a major upgrade without too much hassle after then. So I stayed with Debian, and it's still my main system for installing notebooks or servers.
Knoppix goes back about 25 years, and it's probably fair to say that if I take a look at the spins based on Knoppix, it's probably the most influential live distribution out there on the planet, although it's somewhat dated, let's put it this way, because it's 25 years old, and people who have used damn small Linux as an DSL, and yes, people, this is a Knoppix spin, probably know what I'm talking about. You've been around the block a few times. What's your take of 25 years of spinning up, which is probably one of the most influential live distributions on the planet?
Well, it's very exciting for me to see what other project groups and developers can make out of a small system. That's why I call the base system, which Knoppix relies on, which is a very, very small version of Debian, even without systemd and some other more modern tools that they use nowadays, that with a small system, you can just easily install your add-ons. The Knoppix base system is a compressed file system with just the basic things to boot up. And from there, you can add your own stuff and just add another layer of applications. And if you are happy with the result, you can just add another layer with some additional tools. So it's actually very easy to modify. And this was maybe the reason why others adopted it. Of course, I adopt features from other distros as well. Every time I see something very exciting, I push this into a to-do list for the next Knoppix edition. As long as space lasts, it could get difficult now with AI applications, but that's another topic. So I'm also learning from what others do with Knoppix and what they do in innovative stuff in their distros. However, I could not get myself to switch to 64 bits for faster computers, for newer computers. The file system is still based on 32-bit, which will, of course, run on 64-bit computers, though maybe nowadays the main feature that distinguishes Knoppix from others is that it will still run on very, very old computers, but it will also run on newer computers. I'm limited now in my selection of software because I want to stay with 32 bits processors as long as possible.
What's your reason for sticking with the 32 bits?
Supporting older computers. Yeah, we had been in contact with schools from all over the world who that have old computers in their classrooms, and they take computers which are defective, they repair them, and they are still useful under Linux. There's no way they could run Windows or any other more newer operating system, and so they have all computers with 32-bit processors and very small amounts of RAM and disk space. And so the compressed nature of Knoppix, that you can fit lots of stuff on very small space, and it needs very few RAM because I don't run so many background services that would clog up all your memory. This makes it still usable for all computers. And I need something to have different in Knoppix from other distros. There are so many live distros nowadays which are also used for data recovery, for crypto stuff, for development that are very exciting, and they just won't fit anymore on a small Knoppix version. So I don't try to compete with anybody, but I try to keep Knoppix main features to run on as many computers, as many different computers as possible.
Speaking about the project itself, when doing a little bit of research for this episode, I came across quite a few, let's put it this way, disconcerting articles, blog entries, whatever. Apparently, there was some kerfuffle about the release policy in the last 5 years because only one release was publicly available and the others were tied to a certain publication called Linux Magazine. Exactly. And apparently development has ceased in 2020 something. And needless to say, there was a comment of a certain Klaus Knopper at this year's Linux Catering Days. Sorry, probably we should rephrase that. The Chemnitz Linux Tage, in terms of that Knoppix, I wouldn't say it's dead, but it has ceased development. Any thoughts on this?
Yes, of course. This results in my physical need of sleep and needing some time for upgrades. And in the beginning of Knoppix, when I was still a student, there were up to 4 releases each day. This decreased to 1 release per week. Then we were 1 release per year. Sometimes I just need an incentive. And if a magazine, and this is not only Linux magazine, there are also others, has a special Linux topic where it seems to be useful to include a special feature or program or project on a live CD, then that's my incentive to start a new version and just making the system small enough so that it can contain the program in question and distribute it over a magazine. However, these versions are usually distributable, so you just can copy them. There's no proprietary right on this version. Usually I release a free version on my webpage a few days or weeks before or after. But it's right. The last version was I think it was 20 years or 20 years of Knoppix release, which was during the Knoppix days in Austria in 2020. And since then, I just had no time to release another version. I always say I will do so next year, but I'm saying this for the last 5 years now. However, the project is not dead. I make private versions frequently whenever I have a course or lecture where people should try Linux and use a version where I know what's included and how to get it up and running on different computers. But I would really like to publish another version of Knoppix, let's say 2026. So I'm
just use
searching.
Tomorrow. It's safer that way.
Yes, I'm just saying it's tomorrow, so that always fits as well. Yeah, so it's not dead. Well, it's not dead until I am. So just stay tuned, and I hope to surprise anybody when it's really being released. However, I've also been thinking about the Knoppix release for Raspberry Pi. I did one version in, I think it was 2025, which booted into the graphical desktop within 5 seconds. I was very proud of that. Modern Raspberry Pis can do this with a standard distribution, of course, but at that time, being with a Pi version 2, it was quite spectacular. So I need to find a way to make a build system for Knoppix that will adapt it onto different CPUs and mini computers with different architectures. So I'm not ready. I have no ready idea yet how to do this. Maybe the Yocto build system would be a good option, but it would also mean that I have to strip down the software included a lot in order to be able to recompile everything and make a quick release. Maybe with the help of AI, we could build a website where you can customize your Knoppix ISO. So you tell what should be included, and it will build up a system based on a very, very, very small core version with the programs you just check. And when you download, it's your personal Knoppix release. So
before we touch on this AI angle, which is just down Martin's alley, maybe we can kind of still stay on the Knoppix side just for a tiny bit. Because the question I would have is actually, why did you tie your last few releases to the Linux magazine? instead of releasing it publicly?
Because they asked me.
Simple as that. Okay.
So it's for every open source developer, it's a very nice thing if a company asks, would you make a version especially for our magazine or for our project? And so I'm just doing this. There have been other versions like Linbo. Maybe you have read about that too. That was for schools.
Of course.
A Linux system that can actually repair a Windows system automatically. And the recent version can also boot over the network. This is being used in some schools in, I think, Baden-Württemberg. And it also has a commercial support company that looks after it. And the initial release was done on a project base by me and my team. So these are always things that are project-based, which is a good incentive to catch up with the current development of Linux in form of a new Knoppix system. So that was just by chance that the Linux magazine asked, and I was ready to make a new version. It's very unfortunate that I wasn't able to release a public version on my website shortly afterwards. But anybody who asks can get an ISO of the current developer release, of course.
Okay. I think we talked about the main usage being, or one of the usages being like a rescue type scenario, right, where you can just boot up from your Knoppix USB stick or something like that. Do you is it just the OS that you package in there, or do you add any other kind of tools for that kind of purpose, or any other purpose for that fact?
Exactly. That's one of the main features of Knoppix, that it's layer-based. So you have a base layer with just the operating system. Just the operating system is not right true. The base system always contains the accessibility tools like the Adriane menu system, which can talk what's being displayed on the screen, and some other add-ons. So the base system is about 600 megabytes large. The next layer are just, quote, useful tools for everybody, unquote, containing one open source Office package. It's usually LibreOffice, and recent browsers and some other tools that are useful on the desktop. And then the next layer is usually project specific. So if there's a Java project, I'm putting Java and the corresponding project tools on it. Or if it's for gaming, there's a gaming layer on top. I think I also made one which contained commercial Windows rescue tools, meaning Windows programs which were run with the Wine emulator on a Knoppix base. So people who I need to have tools to rescue very Windows-specific things that are proprietary and cannot be done with our other standard tools can have this kind of software as well. And this is distributed by the companies who ask for such a project-based DVD or CD. So the idea is to have the free version just with the base version, one CD with about 700 megabytes, and DVD version or DVD-sized version. DVDs are also dying out right now, and which can be flashed to a USB stick and be just useful for many purposes. So besides of Knoppix, there are some derivatives with different names that are Knoppix-based.
Nice, but you mentioned building a website where people can customize it. That's at the moment something that's people have to do themselves, right? If they want to use it for.
I'm trying to make myself redundant by automatizing some tasks.
Yeah, good stuff. You mentioned Ariane for the people who don't know what that is. Would you like to?
Exactly. Audio, complicated name. Audio Desktop Reference Implementation in Networking Environment. The background was the idea that if your graphics card is failing or you have no monitor, or simply you cannot see the screen for whatever reason because you are a blind computer user, for example, how can you access a Linux system in a way that you don't need sighted help, someone who can help you or see the screen. Just finding out everything by yourselves by a talking system that immediately, once you put in the CD or the USB pen, starts talking to you and telling you what you can do with this system. So new menu system that's not just an extension for graphical desktops which are talking, but a complete new system which can be operated with a standard keyboard. Just the cursor keys, the enter key and the escape key should be enough to work with this operating system. And that's why we called it Adriane as a reference implementation. It's basically based on a screen reader called SBL. A speech dispatcher for speech output. We use the very fast and many languages speaking eSpeak program. Also Braille support for Braille devices where you can feel what's being written on the screen. And this as an open source reference implementation that you can easily modify in order to create your personal non-graphical operating system.
That sounds pretty advanced to me.
Yeah, actually, I did an experiment in 2008, putting this as the main start option on Knoppix CD version 5.3.1, I think it was. So this was one version that did not display a graphical desktop once you started it, but displayed a text menu which was talking to you. It would even talk if you have no monitor installed. So this confused a lot of people, but for me, it was a lot of fun, of course, to get the users to see how a blind person would see or would experience the user interface in a way that he or she can work without vision. So this was just a one-time experiment. I included Adriane since then in every version, but not as the main desktop option. Now you have to either modify the bootloader configuration file to get it started with speech support, or you have to type Adriane at the boot prompt. Well, it's a little difficult if you don't actually see when the boot prompt appears. So patching the boot configuration is probably the best option, which is usually done on a USB pen. So you can also save your data, modify everything, read emails, save them, and download videos or music or play them and save them for later as well. Having your personal non-graphical operating system on a USB pen. At the time being, this was something new, which is now being caught up by many other Linux and other operating systems who also have a screen reader, audio support, hotkeys for everything. I think what makes Adriane unique is that you don't need any former experience with user interfaces and can just use your normal keyboard with the very distinguished cursor and escape and enter keys, which are easy to discover. As you know, every keyboard has a mark on the F and on the J key. So it's also good for learning the keyboard, which key is located where, and teach yourself computers without any sighted help.
Which is more interesting because it's probably fair to say that disabled people, visually impaired, audibly impaired, whatever, haven't enjoyed the full attention of the FOSS community for the last 40 years, I'm tempted to say. I mean, it's on the rise with screen reader projects and such, but I reckon Knoppix/Adriane really broke the hold here in terms of making a desktop or Linux distribution accessible to disabled people with severe impairments on a broad scale.
Yeah, of course, I had an incentive for that because I met Adriane, my wife, who had a bad experience from the blind school with DOS and screen reader based operating systems, which were without sighted help completely unusable. You had a seeing person boot up the computer for you, set up the programs, and then you would be able to work. While Knoppix Adriane attempts to solve that problem for you and just give you an operating system where you don't need vision to start right ahead. So this was a special, very special solution and user interface designed for blind people, and not just adapting a Visual Desktop for their way of working. So I had a lot of input from my wife, Adriana, of course. She actually told me what she needs for being able to work with the computer, that she wants an easy-to-use text browser that is capable of shopping on the internet, of course, of accessing information, using search engines, accessing articles. So we integrated the eLinks browser with JavaScript support, was the only text browser at that time that supported JavaScript, which was needed for some websites, even for the telephone number search of some phone providers. And then we had another user, his name was Carl, which inspired me for the program Carl, which is, let me see that acronym again, keyboard, auto reflexive learning. Well, basically you can teach yourself the keyboard with this program. You start the program by the menu, and then every key you type on your keyboard is being just read to you. So you can learn where the keys are located on your keyboard, and if you feel yourself confident to type something, you will end the program with the escape key, and then you can use the built-in editor to write texts or emails or access the internet with eLinks type URLs. And whenever you need to learn more about what was that key on my keyboard, what was that key, you can go back to the Carl program and discover your keyboard again until you know everything by heart. So this is another good utility for self-teaching, where you don't need assistants to learn about Linux and how to use the keyboard and different programs. At that time, we didn't even have a shell built in Adriana, because all the things you do in the internet could just be done by the menu, the cursor keys, the enter key, and the escape key. Of course, some blind computer developers, software developers, then asked us to also integrate the shell, which I use all the time, because they use it as well. So we added that point as well. And so also for advanced Linux users who know other means of accessibility will be able to also work with Adriana on the shell.
There have been some other attempts to create Linux distributions to some degree that in the past that for accessible, right? That haven't been so successful. How do you see this working out for Adriana going forward? I guess, do you think this will be, because of its simplicity, being around for a long time?
Actually, most blind people nowadays rather use their smartphones for accessibility, because it's built into Android, in the Apple operating system and any other, and it's actually a little easier to work on the small screen and just touching buttons and getting haptic and audible feedback. So for everyday internet use, it's probably kind of obsolete using Adriana. However, working on a regular computer and just teaching yourself how to use a keyboard, how to write books, be creative on the computer, I think the Adriana menu is still a good help. And so you could just install the Debian packages for Adriana, and they will turn your system into this non-graphical menu, text menu-driven in user interface. And you can add your own programs to the menu, so you have everything you need for daily use in the same menu. So it's not... It's not as important anymore, but for learning computers, And for creating your own stuff, I think it's still useful. So we are continuing to develop it, and the next version will come out with the next Knoppix version, of course.
Okay. So Adriana is still under active development. Good to know.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm very sorry for the long update periods nowadays. There are too many interesting things around to do everything at once. In the last version for the anniversary, I also integrated a Python script, so you can use large language models to use chatbots. This was an experimental feature which I would like to repeat in the next version. Maybe I can also find a very small LLM for local use on your computer. Limited space on the ISO, of course, but this would be a nice add-on in order to discover open source or at least open weight AI language models without having to install something or being customer to a cloud service.
Before we touch on the LLMs, because that's Martin's favorite subject with vector database and all the rest of it, let's say on Adriana just for a tiny bit. Given the fact that I think the first version of Knoppix to feature Adriana was 5.3 release. 5.1 okay. Even
5.3.1, I'm pretty sure.
So that was released in 2000. Which is about 2008.
Yes.
As in 2008, exactly.
Yes.
Given the fact that this has been 17 years ago, what would you call the particular challenges for the last 17 years working on Adriana, given the special requirements of disabled, impaired people using desktops? And going back to your original remark with regards to smartphones, yes, people do use smartphones, but I know many disabled people basically who say, sorry, smartphones are not for me for obvious reasons, and prefer to use the desktops, or prefer to use their desktops rather, all day long, rather than a smartphone if they are, for example, not on the go.
Yeah, it just depends on what you plan to do. If you want to keep contact with chat programs or email or over websites, Adriana can still do all this on the text console. A problem that we run into recently is that a very popular search engine has ceased support for text browsers and now requires graphical JavaScript. So that search engine is not going to work anymore, at least not in the Adriana menu system with eLinks.
Can we name names?
Just recommend switching to DuckDuckGo, which still works on the text console without JavaScript or other search engines that are not requiring a graphical browser.
And the name of the search engine would be, so that people can stay away?
Google, of course.
Okay. I say, okay.
Yeah.
Google.
That's actually very sad because...
Google of all search engines, okay.
Yeah,
because they proud themselves to be inclusive all those years ago.
But in that matter, they aren't.
Okay.
They require browsers that support their version of JavaScript. They say it's because of the user experience would be better with JavaScript. Until a few weeks ago, they accepted if the user agent that the browser transmit to Google was set to Lynx, which is a very popular text mode browser. I had set that in eLinks as well, but that ceased to work now. Now you get only a page that say enable JavaScript. eLinks has JavaScript, but not the JavaScript that Google requires. So Google is basically out of question now for that system, which is sad. It limits the number of options you can have. But other websites like popular shopping websites, eBay, Amazon, and all the others will still work on the text console. Just the search engine of Google doesn't anymore.
So much for do no evil, but I reckon that has gone out of the window for quite some time now.
They keep, and this is interesting for open source, Google keeps saying that the elimination of browsers without their JavaScript support affects only 0.1% of users. but the 0.1% of users affected are exactly my main people that I work for, because I want to make an operating system that fits users that are not the mainstream users that just accept everything if it looks nice. Some people need special software for their way of working with a computer. And for me, the 0.1% are more interesting than the 99.9% others. And this is a very, very open source feature that you are not relying on a number of paying users for your services, but to individuals. You have an idea who want to participate. Who want to tell you how to change things in order so they can work with the software.
So Google, if you're listening, shame me on your product management. No, I'm joking. Take note, because the number of disabled people going forward, and that's a simple number, and that's really just a simple numbers game, won't go down anytime soon. So the more the population grows, the more disabled people you will have. And if you're neglecting that sector, you're losing out on money with regards to advertisements and all the rest of it, as in commercials, which is the major source of income for something called Google as part of the overall Alphabet group. Yeah. But so much for the philosopher's take on the subject. Yeah. But no, I mean, if you take a look at the numbers, and it's probably fair to say that I'm not too far away from the disabled community in Germany. Let's put it this way: the numbers keep growing because because the more people we have on the planet, the more disabled people we have on the planet, excluding that a sector of society is just not on. Full stop.
Actually, there's another thing. One journalist from India once told us what he likes in Adriane is that it can be used by people who never learned how to read and write, because it's talking. It's telling you the market prices of what they produce. You can use websites without being able to actually read the text on them because they are read to you. And also it tells you what's written on the keyboard. So this is not only for disabled people in manners of not being able to view the screen, but also for people who have not learned or couldn't learn how to read and write. So this was one unexpected use for me. And for that reason, we also created a one-time version of Adriane in Indian languages. Mainly Hindi, so it can also read text and write text in that language. So again, with open source, we produce software for the individual and not for the masses. Of course, we are happy if the masses adopt our software, but that's not the main goal. It's the projects, the small projects, the small important projects. These are important to us.
Okay, probably now is the time to touch on Martin's favorite subject, namely LLMs and artificial intelligence, because Martin has adopted a ground rule for the in-laws. No episode shall go forward without LLMs.
Well, actually, I had a different question first.
Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, clearly things like Linux and you mentioned hardware are moving on super fast, right? And I can imagine that, as a project, you need a lot of time and effort. You already mentioned the time gaps between releases and things like that. How do you manage that? These advancements, because all these projects are growing fast right now. Linux has obviously got a massive amount of and hardware is growing in terms of components in many different ways. How do you keep up with all that?
Yeah. We are going to talk about LLMs in a few seconds.
LLMs are the answer,
yeah. One thing that was really annoying was the retraction of UEFI secure boot keys by a certain company, which kept many distros, including Knoppix, from booting on that hardware after Windows had installed a new update for the UEFI keys. So one very important point in the next release will be to have a new UEFI secure bootloader, so Knoppix will boot without modifying the BIOS on new computers. Speaking of hardware for LLMs, Actually, it depends on your LLM if you would need proprietary chipset support. I have been experimenting with open source and distilled versions of LLMs a lot recently and found that on a Raspberry Pi 5, you can run any LLM without additional hardware in decent speed if it's distilled to a size where it just does what you expect from it, like doing just translations or doing just solving math problems or just helping with programming. So instead of using one large proprietary LLM, which needs a lot of resources also in terms of electric power and special hardware, you can use distilled small LLMs, specific purpose LLMs, and make them do what you need. And you just have many of them. You can switch between them if you want to change the goal of your work. And this is my current focus, using small open weights and even open source LLMs for very specific tasks instead of using a large cloud system or a proprietary a system where you need lots of RAM that nobody has. When the DeepSeek version 3.0 was released as quote open source unquote, which it isn't because it's lacking the main thing that you know which training data went inside, but the model is open weights. You cannot run this on your computer because it needs about a terabyte of RAM distributed between about 10 H10 NVIDIA cards, which cost around 350,000 euros. But if you distill this to a very small amount of distilled data that can only do one thing, you can run it on small hardware without needing proprietary graphics card support. Yeah. That's one thing where I think we can do a lot with LLMs, with open source or open weight LLMs. And on the other hand, I'm still hoping for free drivers, open source drivers for GPUs. Doesn't necessarily have to be NVIDIA. But this would also bring things a little forward in terms of efficiency.
Before we go to the boxes, Klaus, and that has been more than riveting, I must say, especially from a kind of disabled and people's perspective. Is there anything we should touch upon, like call to action or something? If you need these 100,000 developers moving Knoppix forward, now's the time to spill the message out to the masses.
Yeah, which is also my main topic in all areas of digitalization right now, is digital sovereignty. Now, before deciding which is the next big thing I should buy or get a customer of, like large LLMs from a proprietary service, what can I do on my own hardware with my own software that I have control over? So exactly this should also be taught at schools. Not just using ChatGPT or DeepSeek or this and that everybody already has installed on their smartphones, but to see what we can do with open source software in that area where we have reliability and where we know which data goes inside. And usually people learning from mistakes when something bad happens, or the AI makes a bad recommendation because it just has too much data and starts hallucinating, didn't understand your question, recommended something else. With smaller models which are focused on the topic, this is not so likely going to happen. So this would be my call to action. Look at what we have with open source before trying to buy something that you will never get rid of again.
Yeah, it's very sensible indeed, and probably not that likely to happen anytime soon, I imagine, unfortunately, given
very optimistic. I have to.
That's the education system works in most countries, but hey, we can always hope. And as you say, if you spread the message, then that helps, right? So. Okay, but it's been very interesting indeed. And hopefully, you can get some more support for your project as well this way. So, shall we move on to the boxes, unless you have anything else, Chris?
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Martin. What's your box? Oh, sorry, what's Klaus' box?
Klaus,
yes,
yes.
Of course. Go first, as usual.
Yeah. Of course, I'm reading a lot of IT news, and I'm trying to understand what motivates people to move all their data, all their digital life into a proprietary cloud where they know they are never getting out of this again. And so in the recent news where virtually all clouds we know have failed already, were compromised with keys being recovered by cyber attackers, or just failed because someone made one simple mistake and suddenly the entire Amazon cloud was dead. Products stopped working. And with this experience, how can we avoid people further moving into these clouds and get them to use their own sovereign clouds or keep working locally? Well, actually, there are so many own cloud, Nextcloud, C-File, you name it, so many open source solutions available which reduce cost, which work perfectly well for everything. So why or how can we explain that you don't actually need to be a member or customer of one of the proprietary clouds? And this was my discovery this week, that all the big clouds have failed in one or the other way. And this can happen anytime again, and this will keep you from working. So maybe we should be more aware of what we use and what we install in terms of digital sovereignty.
So it's more like an anti-pox.
Is it?
You should be aware of.
Okay. Okay. How can I rephrase it? Use open source clouds.
Yes.
Be positive. Be innovative. Use
Exactly.
open source clouds. Be your own. Make your own decisions.
Exactly. And if you're so inclined, do your own stuff in terms of host your own servers. If you don't want to go to the kind of the usual hyperscalers.
Yes.
That would be my advice, yes, on the subject. Martin, over to you. What's your pox?
My pox is a guy called Guy Fawkes.
Oh, yes, Martin. Who's Guy Fawkes?
He is one of the gunpowder plot conspirators, and
he's about, what, 700 years? He's 700 years old or something?
Well, I think he was actually arrested for trying to blow up Parliament, so it didn't really work.
Fair play to him.
It was, yeah. It's still something that's celebrated every year here, that someone had the plan to blow up Parliament, which is...
So let me get this straight, Martin. The United Kingdom, as such, is celebrating a revolutionary...
Well, the people are, yes.
The people, yes. Sorry, not the governor of the UK, of course. No, the people living in the UK.
Governments of the world take note. He may be blown up by Guy Fawkes.
Yes, that would mean basically a rebirth in terms of we will be reborn. Maybe some scientists are exactly working on that right now. But let's see what can be done about this. Let's put it this way.
And your box?
My box would be actually a musical album by a band called Led Zeppelin.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that rings a bell.
Stairway to Heaven?
Yes, something along these lines, Martin. Exactly.
That's the only one I know, I'm afraid.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin 4, which is the only unnamed album that they released in 1971.
Think of
and exactly. And the people who listened to the album called it Led Zeppelin 4 subsequently, because the first three albums were called 1, 2, and 3, of course. But 71 marks the year of the release. Martin was about pushing 20 at this time. I was just a wish in my... Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I was just a wish in my parents' dreams, I suppose. But a lot has developed since. But if you have a chance, people, if you want to listen to some really minting rock and roll, because they wrote history, if you want to get to the bottom of it, that's one of the albums you want to listen to. Page Plant and all the rest of them really wrote history when it comes down to rock and roll. because many of the heavy metal in general bands claimed or were inspired by them, if history is anything to go by. It's probably fair to say that this was one of the most influential albums of all rock and roll history as such. I came across it recently. I had been listening to it about, 40, 30 years ago. I guess I'm slightly younger than Martin. I'm tempted to say. No, jokes aside, it's one of the most influential albums on the planet when it comes down to kind of the origins of rock and roll, I suppose. And with that, we would like to say, we would like to thank Klaus.
Yeah.
Looking forward to having you back on the show in a few years' time to talk about world domination and how Ariadne has conquered the desktop space, not just for disabled users.
Complete LLM support, yeah.
Exactly, with complete LLM support. And with that, people, thank you for listening. This is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you like this feature presentation. If so, please spread the word. If not, please let us know. Feedback at linuxinlaws.eu.